Hello, 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 and welcome to another week's episode of Not D&D, brought to you by EN World Live. I'm your host, Jessica, but I know none of you are excited to see me. Everyone is here, as they're saying, they're very excited. Wendy is awesome, and I'm in love with them, and here there be monsters. So Wendy, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jessica.
Well, I'm very excited, as is the chat. So lots of people jumping in saying that they love you and they love the game. So I'm very excited to be talking about it. If you are wondering what the hype is about, we're going to be talking about Wendy's game Here There Be Monsters this week. So ask any questions as we go through if you're watching live, and if you're listening to the podcast, any links or things we're talking about, we'll put links to in the show notes so you can catch up and watch it there. So before we dive in to talk about your game, Wendy, could you tell us a little bit about you and what you do in tabletop games?
Well, so hi, I'm Wendy, and I make stuff with words and images. And sometimes that means I'm a writer and a designer, sometimes just a writer and stuff like that. I used to be a screenwriter before Bolsonaro came and destroyed everything here. But yeah, and then I decided to make my own games, and that's it.
Amazing. So what was the first tabletop game that you remember playing?
Oh, it was Pathfinder, I think,
Oh,
in
wow,
high
okay.
school.
Oh, wow. So a little while ago. But your
Yeah.
games are kind of quite different from Pathfinder, I'd say, because this is very kind of more rules. Well, I'll let you kind of describe them. How did you start exploring those kind of different games?
I'm sorry, I lost you a little bit at
Oh,
the end.
sorry, my internet. I was just saying, so your games are quite kind of narrative and rules light. When did you start exploring those type of games? Because they're quite different from Pathfinder.
Oh, so um, when I was in high school, I think we started playing Pathfinder, and then a lot of crunchy games like
Okay.
Macton and stuff, like very crunchy stuff. And we didn't really like it, so we started playing Fate,
Oh, yeah.
and I spent a lot of time running and playing Fate Core.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think my first contact with another kind of games was with Fate, but I still didn't really like the way that it did the narrative things that it did. What I did like about it, I kept with my games.
Yes,
Um, but I
definitely.
think that was a huge game changer in my life.
Yeah, I
So
loved
yeah.
Fate when I tried it out as well. And one thing I notice in Fate is it encourages collaboration and being a group together. And I noticed that's a really big theme in your games, and especially in Here There Be Monsters as well. So maybe could you introduce Here There Be Monsters? So if somebody's listening or watching and they've never heard of it, how would you describe it to them?
Here There Be Monsters is um, a game about monsters trying to protect each other from monster hunters and people like that want to contain them or annihilate them. So monster hunters, basically, of all kinds. It was pretty inspired by me reading Hellboy and thinking, oh, why does he hunt monsters? He's a monster, and I get uncomfortable with that. Um, so it's a kind of response to that. It's a it's a celebration of monstrosity. It's playing as monsters, but as something that's punk and
Yeah.
yeah,
And I
that's
get
it,
that,
I think.
yeah, that vibe comes through really strong as well because it's very anti-establishment, very, you know, it literally says punch Nazi occultists, eat the rich. It's very unashamedly, yeah, like, kind of fighting for like the underdogs and people that are a bit different and their right to exist kind of in the world. So I loved the theme of it when you got in touch to be on the show. Talking a little bit about the game and kind of the organizations and the characters, could you talk a little bit about being a monster and creating a character in the game?
So there are 100 backgrounds,
Oh
which
well.
is insane to write.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recommend it to anyone except if you're Chris McDowell. Um, but you can choose between, like, there are 20 normal backgrounds, just
Mm-hmm.
base like humans, and then there are 20 more that are slightly more supernatural, and then the other 60 are outright monstrous.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to put those options so people could play as human allies, as just humans dealing with magic.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to play as a monster
Mm-hmm.
explicitly. You can deal with the themes of the game without playing as a monster, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, the game is explicitly about monstrosity one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all of the backgrounds, they offer you questions and
Mm-hmm.
choices. They don't tell you to do many things. Like, they're not rules
Mm-hmm.
written stone. They just give you some ideas of what to do with your character.
Mm-hmm.
On screen there's the were creature. It's the one people always talk about. That's why I sent you the picture.
Oh yeah.
uh, yeah, and many of the backgrounds have this gimmicky side mechanics to them, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just a way to represent their unique powers and abilities and stuff, but it's not very mechanical. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like the were creature, for example, is, you if you go feral and you want to harm someone, you throw a die and you see if you got out of control. It's stuff like that.
Definitely.
And yeah, I think you can create your own character without the backgrounds. The backgrounds are only there to provide you with some guidance if you want
Mm-hmm.
to go ahead without having the trouble to create your own, and
Sure.
also tell a story through backgrounds.
Yeah. So if you're, so you like say 100 pre-made character background options. So if you're not sure what you want to do, there's so much there for you to start with, but the rules do give you the freedom to do whatever you'd like and kind of prompt you into it, which sounds so fun. I mean, I
Yeah.
know you said you don't have to play a monster, but when you've play tested the game, do many people choose to not play a monster? Because I imagine half the fun is getting to, be creative and try something, a bit different with that.
Actually, it was like half the players I've played with. I had two tables that play tested the game, and I think
Mm-hmm.
half the players uh, wanted to go as monsters, and half wanted to play as
Mm-hmm.
humans that were still monstrous in their way, monstrous like marginalized people in some kind of way,
Mm-hmm.
made to be monstrous by society,
Yeah.
and deal with that whole underground world as
Mm-hmm.
humans felt interesting to those players. So it was actually surprising,
Yeah.
and it did give me more inspiration to go with 20 human backgrounds.
Yeah, definitely. We've had a question about the well, I have a question about the art as well. Someone's mentioned the art that we just had on screen. They said it's incredible. They have it as their background on their tablet and spend so much time staring at it. Could you and the art is incredible. If you're listening to the podcast, you can't see it, but click through the links to see what we're talking about. But could you talk about the art in the book, and because it's clearly an important part of the game, so if you could share that side of creating it with us.
Yeah, so there's this amazing graphic novel called Monstrance
Mm-hmm.
by Lino Ahuda. That's the artist for the game as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to make something with him. And when I could pay him to do something with me, I he was my first choice.
Mm-hmm.
He gives this it's like his art is not about making the monstrous beautiful. It's about showing what's the beauty of the monstrous, of
Mm-hmm.
the grotesque. I think that difference is a key difference that he captures with such a sensibility.
Mm-hmm.
And the other art pieces of the game are all like from public domain, and I did like collage pieces with
Mm-hmm.
public domain images, trying to maintain that punk uh, zine-ish sensibility, but
Mm-hmm.
always very maximalist in a way.
Yeah. I love the art style, and I think it really sets the tone and the vibe of the game really nicely. And like you say, it's meant to be monstrous, it's meant to be grotesque, but it's very beautiful at the same time. So I think it perfectly captures the game, and I think that's the characters you're going to be playing as well. Um, Speaking about the characters in the game, how does the game mechanically work? So you mentioned it's a very rules light system, but it's D6 based, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically resolution is 2 to 6. If you have a tag that that applies to whatever you want to do, you take the highest two of you roll 3 to 6 if you have a tag that applies,
Mm-hmm.
and you take the highest two.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, if you have a condition that may get in your way, you roll also 3 to 6 and take the lowest two.
Mm-hmm.
um, but the golden rule, I think, of the game is like written in huge letters, is do what you want, but
Mm-hmm.
deal with the consequences. And I think that's the ethos of the
Mm-hmm.
game that captures the way that I think players could deal with the mechanics of the game. They are there to help you play, not there to get in your way. So do whatever you want with them.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, when you create your character, you have 6 tags.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 tags for each of 3 verbs. You have do tags. There are things you know how to do well. You have be tags. There are things that define your character more specifically to them. And you have tags that are things your character can have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Those tags help you in situations. They stand for skills and abilities and stats and and inventory and everything, and that's it. And everything else
Mm-hmm.
is optional, like
Yeah.
magic, everything else.
Sure. And you because you did screenwriting before, is there something in the rules that is inspired about kind of long-term mechanics with like character arcs?
Yeah, actually, when I this came from my previous game, Marvelous Mutations and Merry Musicians.
Mm-hmm.
um I was like procrastinating. I should be writing a script for a TV show, and I wanted to write a game. And the way I think about game mechanics is very similar to screenwriting quote unquote rules. We
Hmm.
get all those rules in screenwriting books and classes that are not actually rules. They are just tools for you to develop your narrative and
Hmm.
character arcs and stuff. But people treat them as rules a lot of times. And that's similar to how I view game mechanics. And then I started thinking that actually there were some screenwriting concepts that could be really useful for character advancement
Hmm.
in a long term campaign, because it needs a little structure so you know what goals your character want and how do you represent that advancement. So I took the idea of wants and needs for a
Hmm.
character and the idea of narrative beats from screenwriting and put that as an optional mechanic for long-term play in the game. And I took that from my previous game and made that more streamlined.
Perfect. That sounds really great. For me, I think this game would be so much about the characters and their stories and journeys. So I think having a long-term campaign where you can build that slowly and develop as a group sounds really exciting to me. It sounds really exciting to people in the chat as well. We've already had somebody say, "Yeah, I'm buying this," so already sold. If you are interested, I've put a link in the show notes to the Soul Muppet store where you can pick it up, and the links on screen or on the show notes in the podcast. So if you're also thinking, "Yeah, I'm going to buy this," you can check that out there, and we'll have links later as well. But going back, we had a question as well, going back to the art, someone asked. They said, so you mentioned you've been looking forward to working with Lino, the artist. What were you most surprised about when it happened, about working with them?
That someone wanted to give me money to do it.
Really?
But apart from that, that we got away with it, because if you look at his art in the book, there's so much stuff that would be considered grotesque and
Hmm.
not safe for work. And
Hmm.
there's the werewolf that I sent you.
Hmm.
We had to censor it for the Kickstarter page. It
Oh,
has
really?
a vulva showing right in the middle of the page, right?
Hmm.
And we had all the freedom to go and do it because we felt it was important. There's a kind of content notice at the beginning
Hmm.
of the game
Yeah.
that says like this is a game about bodies, and
Hmm.
sometimes those bodies are
Yeah.
grotesque, sometimes those bodies are monstrous, and sometimes those bodies are showing their monstrosity uh,
Hmm.
with their nakedness. So that was something that was important to
Hmm.
Lino. And lino Lino has a history with drawing some uh, hybrid
Yeah.
monstrous characters, and the nudity is important for that to show
Hmm.
the mix and match of human and not human in the hybridity.
Hmm.
And yeah, it worked, and it worked so well.
So the main surprise was just, like you say, getting it done, achieving it, and making it happen. But it
Yeah,
definitely did. And there's a lot of love for the game, even just here in the chat right now, which is fantastic. So talking about the game, what sort of stories are people telling at the table? So what, because this isn't your classic, we're going to be adventurers and go kill a dragon story. So what stories are we telling here?
well, you can tell any story that you think can fit any urban fantasy
Hmm.
story, basically. Um, it's supposed to be set in a city with a magical underground.
Mm-hmm.
So anything fits. There's like Magic Bazaar.
Mm-hmm.
There's a infinite library. All of those tropes and
Mm-hmm.
cliches and archetypes, I try to write them in the book the way I wanted them,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what fascinates me about urban fantasy, and that's what I
Mm-hmm.
like about it.
Yeah.
And but also the kind of stories that I saw people playing and I've played in are usually stories about rebellion and resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Or the game is supposed to be very cathartic
Mm-hmm.
for people who feel like they were made to be monstrous in any
Mm-hmm.
way by the world. And taking your monstrosity and using that and being proud of that
Yeah.
and fighting those who don't like your monstrosity can be very cathartic. So yeah, anything you could play with, like the World of Darkness, you can play with this game,
Mm-hmm.
but also you can have more cathartic,
Mm-hmm.
monster focused in like monstrosity in marginalized meaning way.
Fantastic. A huge part of the game is help supporting like collaborative world building in the game. So how do you recommend a table if they're playing this game for the first time? What advice do you have for them on the collaborative world building aspect of the game?
Yeah, so I actually, whenever I have the time, I want to publish like a DLC with
Mm-hmm.
uh, lots of optional stuff, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
things is ideas for more collab,
Mm-hmm.
including GM less mode. That was
Oh
something
wow.
that I had no I had no experience with when I started writing this, but that some friends uh, told me that would be great for this game, and yeah, it would. But in what we have in the game,
Mm-hmm.
I wrote it with in a world with a very non-hierarchical
Mm-hmm.
ethos. So everything is decided in group. You start the game by making a manifesto that I stole from Microscope.
Okay.
Microscope has like a let. I don't know if you've played Microscope.
I haven't, no.
Yeah, it has like a palette that you start the game with,
Okay.
and everyone pitches in saying
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, I want this game to have this. I don't want this game to have this."
Okay.
And that palette um, guides the tone and the content
Mm-hmm.
of the game,
Okay.
the whole game, and that's called the manifesto in this game. Uh, that's done completely in collaboration. So the organizer, that's the name for the person that organizes the adventures and
Mm-hmm.
sessions, does not decide in advance how it's going to be and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
With a session zero deciding your manifesto and what do you want the game to have and not
Mm-hmm.
have.
Mm-hmm.
After that, you create your group. Everything is collaborative again,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone is supposed to, but you're also not. Uh, you don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything that I say in the game because I'm not your boss. But you can. Everyone can create an NPC that's part of your group of monsters, and hopefully
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be important to the game. And you create your haven together. That's the place that you can be safe. No one can access besides you, and so on.
I love that. That sounds, yeah, I love the idea of that collaboration, and also it sounds like it would make the game very safe because you can say what you want to include, what themes, what boundaries they are, because I love playing games that are a bit more dark and that have that element of catharsis in. But in order to play that, you need to make sure everybody else wants to play that game as well. Do you have any
Exactly.
other recommendations on like safety and with specifically playing this game?
Oh, I always include a suggestion to use lines and veils in the X card in my games,
Yeah,
because that's what's worked for me personally. But
sure.
it's also not like do this
Yeah.
because everyone has what works for them specifically. But I also put this suggestion because that has worked for me a lot in the past.
For sure. I use,
Like
yeah.
I'm terribly arachnophobic, so I
Okay.
always put it as a veil, at least, that no
Okay.
spiders, please. I don't want to interact with them.
And is that why there's no spiders in the game then? Are there spiders in the game? I don't think there were
I
there?
don't think so. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't. I wouldn't play a spider.
I was about to say, I was like, I don't think I remember seeing one when I was looking, but I just wanted to check. But yeah, so that's interesting to know. So if you're also arachnophobic, this game has no spiders. I also, one of the images you sent through was the bureau here, which has a very different feel to kind of the monsters. Could you tell me a bit about the bureau?
So the bureau actually was the first thing that I thought of, because they're your typical protagonists in those kinds of stories. They're the BPRD from Hellboy. They're the SCP Foundation. They are the Men in Black, etc., etc., etc. They are responsible for maintaining normalcy. They are responsible to protecting the status quo and normal humans. And how that plays out is up to you. You can play them as totally genocidal, or you can play them as more nuanced, like, oh, I'm just doing my job, but it's still banality of evil.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they are inherently against your existence. And that was a kind of conflict that I wanted to explore. And they're basically cops, right? They're the kind of people who are watching you for any sign of deviancy. So if you show any any sign that you're abnormal, they're gonna come for you. And they operate in secrecy, so they can do whatever they want.
Excellent. Great. Sounds like they're really good friends.
Yeah,
So
they're actually not the huge villains of the game.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You can choose to team up with them if you want against bigger enemies, for example.
Oh, that's
If you
true.
want a
I
game with ethical choices and stuff.
definitely. And I suppose there's some of them that are like can be bought or something, like, like they're maybe liable for corruption or things like that, you know, just
Yeah,
like real police
I
forces
mean, all
maybe.
cops are bastards. All cops are bastards. I hate cops. Fuck cops. But there are worse things, and sometimes they can work with you to help your needs and stuff, because there are Nazis in the game. So
Oh yeah, but they're very much the bad guys that you're going around punching, just to be clear.
Yeah, the
Excellent.
Nazis, by the way, I explicitly say don't give them any complexity. They're just there to be punched.
Yeah. Excellent. Love that. What other sort of do you have any stories from playtesting or your games of the kind of stories that you've had happen in these games, or the kind of bad guys that have existed?
There was once I played a playtest. I never run my playtests
Mm-hmm.
because I get nervous. And anyways, I wanna experience it as a player. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's even more. You learn more in the playtest when you play it as a player, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, is it because I get nervous? But but I played it as a cat, and I
Mm-hmm.
was actually, I think, a spirit trapped. Yeah, I was a familiar trapped in the body of a kitty, and
Okay.
one of my tags was that I could do like cat stuff. It was
Mm-hmm.
just that I could do cat stuff, and that was enough because anyone knows what cats can do. Cats can climb a window, but
Mm-hmm.
cats cannot fly. It's vague enough that it allows for improvising, but it's defined enough that it allows for it to not be boring because you can do anything you want, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
definitely.
this was one thing that made me learn how to make the specific powers of the backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And in this game, we played. Jordan is watching. I think Jordan ran this game for me, and uh, yes, we ended up against like a cult of money. I think that wanted to harvest people to make money grow out of them, and that was something that's not inside the game, but that the game
Mm-hmm.
had the vibe that made that grow out of it, and
Yeah,
that's cool.
that
It
is
was like
very
a
cool.
god of money or something like that, a god of greed,
Mm-hmm.
and we ended up battling a cult of cultists of the, I think it was Mammon.
Yeah. I like that vibe because, as we all know, capitalism is the true evil.
Right.
It's always the thing. But yeah, and someone was about to share the story of the game that they're running, but they've just realized that they are watching and people in their game are currently here. So that's okay, viewer, if you don't want to share all the details of your game with us today and ruin it for your players. But when you finish running it, come back and share it with us. So the game sounds, really interesting. A lot of people have already said, yep, I'm totally buying this. So they're going to go to the Soul Muppet store. If people are interested in hearing about what you're going to do with the game in the future, like someone's interested in the solo mode version of it, where's the best place to kind of follow you on the internet, or keep up to date with what you're doing?
um right now I'm like taking a time off social media, so
Mm-hmm.
you can find my contact info and CV at my card,
Mm-hmm.
wendyU.card with two R's dot
Mm-hmm.
co.
Yeah.
But you can also find me on Twitter if
Mm-hmm.
it still exists
As of
when I
today,
come
it
back to
does.
study. Yeah, I'm focusing on my thesis right now, so I'm not really. I'm trying not to access Twitter. Um, and there's also my itch store where you
Mm-hmm.
can see my older games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's it.
Okay, great. So some good places to follow there to keep up to date with kind of what you're doing. So I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to kind of share about the game, or any questions I haven't asked you, or anything else you'd like to kind of share about Here, There, Be Monsters.
Mm, I just want to say, like, people always assume the game is about queerness because I'm trans.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to make sure that people know that's not about queerness. I wrote it from my place as a trans woman, but
Mm-hmm.
it's about monstrosity as standing in for being made to feel wrong or
Mm-hmm.
weird or like you don't belong. Anyone, anybody,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're like cis and straight, you
Mm-hmm.
can feel like a monster, and you're welcome to be a monster. You know, it's not about queerness. It's about power and
Yeah.
trying control and freedom, I think.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, yeah, I think anybody, no matter what walk of life you're from, you can relate to being made to feel ashamed or an outsider or left out. Even if that was just something as simple as like when you were in school, maybe you were kind of seen as the bit of the weird kid, and so you weren't, really popular. That could be an element that you relate to it in some way. So yeah, I think that's really great to say. The other question I have for you is, do you have any recommendations for other indie tabletop creators? The rules are you can't be Dungeons and Dragons because the show is
I
called
have
not
lots of
D&D.
recommendations.
Please,
um,
now is your time to share some.
I'm sorry, I lost you for a second.
Oh, I was just saying if you could share those recommendations you have.
Okay, so first of all, please, please, please buy more games from trans people, all of them. uh, all of games that have illustrations by Evelyn Moreau are automatically viable because of the illustrations, you don't even need to play the game. You just can look at the illustrations. Um, Evie Lockhart is
Mm-hmm.
one of my biggest influences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they just created Red Girl Games.
Okay.
Is another creator very similar to my kind of sensibilities,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff more it's still indie but like bigger. I think my favorite systems is like for horror games, because I still play a lot of horror,
Mm-hmm.
is Follow Dark and its descendants like Trophy.
Mm-hmm.
And for adventure games, I'd say it's Into the Odd, but
Oh, I
that's
I
it.
have that right here. That's my copy of Into the Odd
Yeah,
right there.
it's a kind of obvious choice, but
Yeah.
I love it.
I've not played it yet, but the book is beautiful, but I've not got a chance to play it yet, so that'll be on my list for the year. Um, okay, great. Well, Wendy, that's bringing us up to the end of our time together. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your game with me and with everybody that's come to watch. Um,
Um,
Oh, losing a little bit there. But that's okay because we're near the end of the show. I just want to say thank you so much to everybody that came along to watch as well. Oh, Wendy, you're back. Sorry.
Hey, I sorry. I think it was my connection. I don't know. I lost you for a bit. I was saying I forgot another recommendation.
Oh, okay.
Huffa, that that Huffa is working on a hack of Here There Be Monsters. So keep tuned.
Excellent.
And she has a design sensibility that's also very similar to mine.
Mm-hmm.
Trans people are doing the most radical and genre defying stuff out there currently.
Fantastic. I love that. Another recommendation in at the end there, just before we wrap up. Thank you so much for your time and coming on today. And thank you to
Thank
everybody that came
you.
along to watch and listen. We'll be back next week. Next week, we're looking at Urban Shadows. So, more kind of urban, kind of fantasy things we're looking into here as well. So, if that's your sort of vibe, maybe come back next week, same time, same place to watch Urban Shadows. That's all for us this week. Thank you very much. Bye.